Welcome to Business Talk Sister Talk. I'm Bekkah, and today's topic is understanding the business of consumer packaged goods. And with me today, I have James Richardson, and I would say he's a pretty well-known expert on this because he's got lots of material already out there. He has his own podcast. There's so many things he's doing, and I'm really excited to talk with him. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks, Rebecca, for letting me on.
My first question for you, even before we start everything, is can you define what consumer packaged goods are for us?
So basically, I define it as everything sold at Target.
Okay.
With the exception of, almost nothing. Actually, everything at Target. Yeah, that's pretty fair. The bulk of the money, though, is in something called fast moving consumer goods. And those are the things that you buy every week or month at the grocery store or Target.
Okay.
Not so much apparel, not so much camping supplies.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. Yeah. I was like, or maybe tires, but Target doesn't have tires, just Walmart.
I mean, since we're more pedagogical on this show, I mean, the key thing for people who are new to that industry to understand is that it's based in what makes it different than like selling a car or selling a mattress is that, the business model of moving product in the world I'm in is based on getting the same person to come back very shortly and buy some more.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the fundamental thing you have to remember because it's the basis of everything I do. And that makes it different than selling a mattress online, which you will buy once every 10 years.
Okay.
And by the time you need the new mattress, you'll have no idea who sold you the first one. And you probably won't care because you will be off to the next new mattress company.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, loyalty doesn't matter. So that's why you'll see that's why you'll see a lot of flash in the pan companies in something called durable goods.
Okay.
And these could be consumer goods technically because they're marketed on the television and on Facebook to you, but they know you're only going to buy it once.
Mm-hmm.
And so their approach to growth and the market and running their whole business is totally different.
Okay. So this is
It's a game for rich people because you have to have a massive ad budget.
For durable goods.
If you're going to sell something one time and make it a big business, you have to have a massive advertising budget.
Okay. So that's
End
good
of
news.
Story.
Good news for us because
you can be filthy rich.
Yeah. If you want to do lower price things or like have a less budget, you can be in the consumer packaged goods.
You need something that's purchased weekly and consumed daily.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So the package empties on a daily basis. And that's really where you want to be if you can.
My next question then, and this kind of goes into a little bit more about what exactly do you do then?
So my business is working with fast growing food, beverage, personal care, household goods brands that are consumed daily and weekly by consumers, by millions of consumers. And I work for the premium priced insurgents, the people who are trying to take on Frito-Lay, Kraft, Pepsi, General Mills. The people who are selling to dissatisfaction with mainstream brands that are sold at Walmart.
Okay. So more like the high end maybe, or is it not necessarily always?
So they're called, in the media, they're called natural organic brands.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's more or less the processing standard for the products. So they don't use synthetic chemicals, petrochemicals, and about 10,000 other additives inserted into American foods.
Wow. That's
There's actually
a book.
There's a book you can buy. And you'll never shop at Walmart again if you buy this book. It's by a nutritionist. I don't know if she put out a recent edition. I bought it 20 years ago. And it's a dictionary. It's called the Dictionary of Food Additives. Wow. And there's 10,000 additives in the book.
That's a lot of additives when you think about it.
More than half are synthetic. In other words, they are laboratory derived fractionated chemicals. Heavily linked to gas and oil refineries. So there are petrochemicals that come out of gas and oil refineries, like your gasoline in your car, that are deemed food grade.
Wow.
By our government and put into food.
Okay,
and beverages.
that seems a little scary.
The
But
most common one is propylene glycol, which is windshield wiper lubricant in your windshield wiper fluid, and that's in hundreds of products.
wow.
So that's the most extreme case I'm giving you, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's just if you get the book, I guarantee you'll have to change your diet. And so the world I'm working in are people who, it's not so much that they're ideological about that battle, but they're interested in either premium quality or they wanted to deprocess some category that they were dissatisfied with, like frozen entrees or something. So they wanted to take on that mission and they developed the solution. Some of them are horrible and some of the products are amazing. And some scale to be 9-figure businesses. You probably heard of Annie's Mac and Cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And that, it's a $500 million brand now that was only $4 million in 2000, 21 years ago.
Okay.
So those are the kinds of brands I work with, and they're usually at the $4 and $5 million level. Like no one knows where this is going. Nobody's looking at them and saying, wow, they're not on the cover of Inc. magazine, but they are premium price goods. So they're not, they're primarily for college educated households in the United States. Those are the folks who are increasingly buying this food.
Okay.
And demanding this level of quality in ever greater numbers, and their pantries are becoming more devoted to this stuff.
Interesting. So I guess I have a question about when you started doing this, why did you start working in this industry?
Well, I originally got into CPG because I was a market researcher. So I'm an anthropologist. I jumped off the academic train because it was making me miserable. I found myself in market research, which is where a lot of social scientists wind up.
Okay, so anthropology is a study of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my focus was, my specialization in graduate school was how people display their social identities in public space, and how they conceal some and reveal others, and how they do that, and what's at stake behind that. So basically, folks like myself are trained to study human interaction, displays of symbols, language, behavior, and what's behind it. What are the unconscious logics behind it?
Yeah, I feel like that would be a hard thing to do, even in like a market research aspect of interviewing people.
Right. It is. It's hard to use traditional techniques. And I trained in non-traditional techniques, but I also had to learn how to do interviews very cleverly, like an FBI negotiator, a criminologist, because people aren't really self-aware of why they do a lot of what they do. And that's one reason that human society functions, is that we don't have to think about it. You don't have to think every 15 seconds, I got to breathe now. If you had to do that, you'd be able to do nothing else all day. Your brainstem takes care of that automatically. So in the realm of social interaction, there's an equivalent, and that is memorized, learned social behavior, which is habituated to an unconscious degree. In other words, you just make decisions unconsciously in social life, including when you're at the grocery store and you have to go pick something up for your family, right? That's a social decision. You're not engaged, you're not in some vacuum video game. Like, you're getting food for a real social audience and you're the person doing it. That's a social process. Now, it may just be you in a cart in an empty store. Doesn't matter. It's still a social process.
Well, I think about when I buy food for my family, and the emotional process that goes into that is like real, because I'm like,
oh yeah. Well, women get a lot more emotion.
Well, I think when somebody tells you like 3 times, like, I do not like this ketchup, never buy it again, you like have this, oh yeah, I remember, we can't eat that or whatever it is.
So those dynamics, those general cultural dynamics and brand specific ones was something I did for big companies. I did the behavioral research for about 5-7 years. And then I shifted into consulting. And when I got into consulting, the questions became more business focused, which is, well, okay, given this behavioral trend in American society, like more and more people are eating natural foods consumed on a daily basis, like they're actually getting natural mac and cheese and they're consuming a case a month.
Yeah.
In the 2000s, this was absolutely bizarre to the executives of major food companies, because to them, premium food and beverage, that was like things you did at the dinner party.
Hmm.
Oh, let's have Dom Perignon. Or in my favorite in my book was, oh, it's Christmas. Let's get a $20 Toblerone bar, stick it under the tree.
Mm. And
And
before
we
you
did
even,
not eat Toblerone any other time of the year. We never wanted to. We immediately went back to M&Ms and Snickers.
yeah, and before we move on in that,
So
I wanted to ask you, because I know you just said you mentioned it in your book. Can you clarify what book it is and where they can find it? Because I just
yeah,
want to make
it's
sure
a
that's
book.
available.
The book is called Ramping Your Brand:
Okay.
How to Ride the Killer CPG Growth Curve. And it's written for startup entrepreneurs who are actively in the market.
Okay.
And have been for a couple of years. So it may not be the audience I'm talking to right now, but this could be you in the future. And certainly it'll give you the first half of the book will give you a sense of the design challenge involved in being a successful entrepreneur in the world that I'm in. And generally speaking, you need to command a premium price if you want your business to function and be solvent, really. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so it's funny the market has become, investors and everybody else have been interested in natural organic and premium brands, mainly because they've been the engine of all the growth in consumer packaged goods in the last 20 years. It's Kind
Mm-hmm.
Bar, Skinny Pop, Vita Coco Coconut Water, all these brands. Even vitamin water was a premium price product in the first 5 years. We've all
Hmm.
forgotten that because it's at Walmart for $1 a bottle, but it was atrociously expensive in LA in the late 90s when it started. So it's the right way to start when you don't have a lot of money, because you're making a lot of money on every single sale. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you can get 10% of your people to buy it like 5 times a week, you get this that's the engine of exponential growth in the world I'm in, is getting what they call super fans to
Mm-hmm.
habituate to buying cases a month. And then you have this second group out who's buying it, cases every other month. And
Yeah.
that nucleus creates a rapidly growing business, and it creates like psychotic gonzo fans who then go on Instagram and then tell other friends to go do it, right? So that's what's happening in 2021. 20 years ago, they would just go to parties and tell everybody old school way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
now they're doing it offline too, but that's how these brands get built. That's they have an electric street level organic energy to them, but they're not in the media. I
Okay.
mean, they're not in the mainstream media, right? It's not on CNN, but
Right.
quietly it's building. And
Well, I
it's
think
sort of
that's the
sort of
point
what's
why.
happening to my book.
Well, and I think that's kind of what you were mentioning, like how people were like, "Oh, this is just coming out of nowhere. Why is it people are buying this stuff in most of these bigger brands and they don't even see it coming?" And I think that's the point, is like it's
No.
slow and quiet and it's growing, and then all of a sudden it's a main competitor.
So yeah, for those still in school, high school specifically, this is trigonometry, right? This is, if you studied logarithms, then you probably studied exponential growth, probably glossed over it. But if you go back to your textbook, I'm sure there's something in there about the logarithm of exponential growth. Now, if you study the COVID-19 virus and how it accelerates through local communities, it's the same logarithmic
Hmm.
math, right? So when you have viral caseload doubling every 2 weeks or 1 week, you basically have exponential growth in caseload, right? And so we've all been witnessing that with this pandemic. And believe it or not, uh, exponential growth is a phenomenon that's happening in many, many, many other parallel sectors. And CPG is one of them. It's just much less common in consumer packaged goods because up until very recently, the people who control your access to anything, the large companies,
Mm-hmm.
they control the shelves at the main retailers. And so they literally, historically, have been the primary options that you literally see.
Yeah, the
But
gatekeeper
if
to
you don't see the
access.
other
Mm-hmm.
option, then you can't make that other choice.
Mm-hmm.
But see, that's all withered away because the retailers are letting natural organic right into the main aisles. Annie's is right next to Kraft mac and cheese. It's right next to it. And so as the world of retailing is changing, then online, just the online portal really doesn't care who's Frito-Lay and who's General Mills versus the nobody brand. I
Oh,
mean,
that's so true.
it only cares if there's more traffic to Frito-Lay. So you can really level the playing field there. That opens up choice. That has given So as these gates have fallen, it's a lot easier for entrepreneurs in CPG to get to $1 million, to get to 5 million, to get to 10 million. What's still very, very hard is to become what I would call a scale brand, which is 100, 125 million or more, where you're going to actually start to influence the entire national scene in both retailing as well as culture. Like you'll become a thing. You
Yeah,
will
that
be
people
on
do.
the main,
Right.
you will be interviewed by mainstream media outlets by the time you get there. So now it may be once and they'll forget you. Vita Coco had its 2 to 3 year media circus for a while, but now nobody talks about it. so these brands, they come up, they get to a certain scale, and then very few of them get to where Kind Bar and Chobani are, where they're multi-billion-dollar brands.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that it's kind of a risky place to be in for long term if you're not consistently developing new things, because you could basically become just a part of a fad instead of a actual sticking consumable thing?
Yeah. I mean, the risk that I've seen for entrepreneurs with chasing fads is that if you pick the right one, like keto,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, retailers were looking for any supplier. So you could easily get on the shelf. And then you get a lot of what they call B2B sales to the retailer.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, oh my, I've hit the jackpot, right? But you don't yet know how to run a company.
Mm.
You don't know how to sustain working capital and maintain cash flow. And so there's a lot of these folks who they get in and then they flame out. They flame out because they actually can't service the demand at the retailer. That's the problem with chasing fads, is that you actually have to have a network and some seed capital to be able to move really fast. And most people don't. But that's a rare occurrence. Most people don't time the market that brilliantly. Most people are a couple years before or ahead of a major trend.
Okay.
That's where a lot of my clients are. And I think a lot of my clients are actually way ahead. Right. And so when you're that innovative, but there are signs that you have a hook to scale, that's when what my book is about, exponential growth, becomes really powerful, because you're doubling the business every year, but exponential growth is doubling off a small base, right? It's like compound interest in a mutual fund. And it's one reason why so many people last March poo-pooed the pandemic. And even in last April, poo-pooed the pandemic. As New York was going through a huge surge, there were still people who were like, it's nothing. And the national daily death rate was still pretty low in April, right? But the epidemiologists, people who are basically world-class statisticians as well as virologists, they run big calculus math all the time in their sleep. So they knew where this was headed. This is when the daily death rate was in like 10 and 15. And I did a projection out with 3 weeks of the first data. And then we were going to get to 5,000 deaths a day by the end of April, had we not locked down cities.
So are there
that's the power. So that's the power of exponential math, is by the time you notice it,
it's already
too late to control it.
Mm-hmm.
See
I
what
was
I'm
just
saying?
gonna say,
And this is the public health lesson. But the other thing is, with CPG, if you're creating that exponential growth, you're there every day. So it's actually painfully slow to you.
Okay.
Because think about it. If you were open up Excel and go 500,000, then double it to 1 million, then double it to 2 million, and then double it to 4 million, stop. How long is it going to take to get to 100 million, guys? Seems like a long time. Because I just counted 4 times, we're only at 4 million.
Right.
It's actually only another couple steps. So that's how doubling works, right?
So one of my questions with that is, are there key milestone marks that a person, like if they're growing that kind of business, should hit to make sure they're on the right path? What kind of metrics do you see typically? Like if you're doing these things, you're getting there.
Because a lot of people now start online with consumer packaged goods, and I basically tell everybody on the internet that that's what you should be doing. Like, unless you're selling frozen food, which is about the only because there the economics are upside down. So you have to be a rich person.
Yeah.
Or you have to have a couple million in seed money. But if you just want to do like a nutrition bar or something else, start online.
Okay. Lowest risk.
Because you can get much better data. You get world-class data on your consumers much earlier in the process, and then you can course correct much earlier when you're still small. The number one thing that you have to be able to prove is that without spending a lot of promotional money, whether it's a sponsored ad on Amazon or whether it's a discount promo at a grocery store, if you get into one, the brand needs to be growing without promotion, because that's the sign that people are talking about it to other people and getting them to buy it, or the people who bought it earlier are buying more and more. It's one of those two things, and they're both good things.
Okay.
But if
Well,
you need enough time, you need to be small for just long enough to be able to notice, which is not impossible. It's easier to do that now than ever, before you go and hit the gas. And that's basically the big lesson of my book, is that unfortunately, when the way that retailing is working now is that they're like book publishers, people at Target and Hy-Vee and all these people. The merchandisers are like, they become like book editors.
okay.
So they basically, they pick failures all the time. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't have any better sense than me. That's what's going to, probably less sense than me, what's going to be a big hit. Because I'm actually studying the link between design and behavior. They're not. So, and they're desperate to find the next big one. You know, they want to find that, and they want to be the hero. And so the way they do that is like a book editor. They just let a whole bunch of stuff through. Not everything, but more than they should. Right. So our stores in America are totally oversupplied. Like the number of brands in any category usually is not justifiable from an operational efficiency perspective. If you're really like McKinsey management consultant, you're like, if the store was 1/3 the size and we rationalize these better, we would make even more money because we'd have a lower electricity bill. Right. But instead, we maintain the store size and the fixed costs. And we just pray that rotating in these new products, that enough of them will continue to grow, that we'll get growth. Right? So this is the nightmare of running a supermarket. And so they let all sorts of weird stuff in. They let more and more weird stuff in that is not market ready, has no scale potential, doesn't even have growth potential, and is not being run by particularly good business people. Because they want to find that one, but they also make money. This is what a lot of people don't understand. The supermarkets, especially, they make money off fees charged
for
to
the
the
slotting
suppliers.
space. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And so they have an incentive actually to not care too much about how successful you're going to be, because they actually have an incentive for you to fail.
That's unfortunate to think about.
Well, it's a very cynical industry. So I think this is another reason why people say start online. You get better data about your consumers, you can course correct, and you'll be bigger. You'll actually have a business by the time you go and say, hey, hello, Hy-Vee, I'd like to get in your stores. Now you actually have a multi-million-dollar business, and that, believe me, that conversation will go differently.
Okay. Well,
and
you
you will also sound more professional by then.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I want to make sure that we stay on time, and I know that we're going to do another episode next week together, so I'm super excited about that. So if you're listening to this one, you'll definitely want to check out the episode after this, where we start talking a little bit more about what that looks like for business. So how about you tell people where they can find you or hear more from you?
So I have a blog on my site that people might be interested in. That is premiumgrowsolutions.com.
Okay.
/blog. That might be something. I'm on LinkedIn posting pretty regularly.
Okay.
I have a explicit podcast, Startup Confidential, so that may not resonate with a lot of you listeners. But if you're open to that, Startup Confidential is the podcast. It's on all the major players, and that's where I actually take a more Anthony Bourdain approach to the industry, so that people are getting educated on what is really going on.
Okay.
Which people are not telling them.
Okay.
So I do share a lot of blinded sort of disaster stories from my client files or other sources.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and we're going to transition now into the Gawk portion. And I know that you said you have lots of stories. So I was just thinking when you said Anthony Bourdain, he has this mac and cheese recipe. By the way, it's on the Splendid Table website. If anyone's looking for that, it's amazing. And so I'm a big fan. I read his biography book quite a long time ago. But anyways, do you have a story about an interesting experience that you've had working with brands that you wanted to share with us?
I used to go to those trade shows.
To trade shows for Food.
for food and beverage. Yeah, just
Oh,
because
okay.
I was new and I was trying to get the word out on my business. And I honestly was doing a lot of market research on the startup world because it
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
newer to me. And this was in preparation for my book. And so I went to the trade shows and I was smart enough to know not to sell like
Mhm.
my ridiculously overpriced consulting services. So, so I wasn't there to sell. I literally was just there to meet people and then just sort of it was like a cultural immersion.
Yeah.
Right? So I
Mhm.
would go and I would eat stuff all day long. Right? I went to
Okay.
food. So there's samples everywhere.
I had a great. I should just go just for the food.
No,
That would.
you don't want to go because you don't because and this is the point is that like Expo West, one of the largest ones in the country, it'll probably never be that large again after the pandemic, but they don't screen for people who have decent products. That's not how
Oh,
they
they just
sell.
let anybody have a booth.
I could get a booth and pretend to have a company. Yeah. So they need some evidence that you do have a company, but yeah, they don't. It's not like they sit there and say, "This is not edible." Oh no! So most of the stuff's horrible. And then
That is so
I
depressing.
literally tried. I once tried a snack bar that was so completely foul tasting. I almost gagged and I had to turn away and spit it into my hand mid conversation. And then I had to find a way to leave the conversation because I couldn't turn around with it in my hand.
Oh, yeah. That's an awkward situation.
But thank God it was a trade show. So there's literally thousands of people coming at you, like kind of
Yeah.
like a zombie exodus,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I just basically twirled myself around and then waved with the other hand, said, "Sorry, I got to run." And then I
Mindlessly
literally went to the
milling about.
bathroom and washed my mouth. So,
Wow.
and not the first time, but, and one of the challenges is that people conceptualize innovation very easily.
And then the execution is not
Turning
great.
it, but in food and beverage,
Yeah.
as anyone in the industry would tell you, well, actually, anyone who's had kids will tell you. You don't even have to be in the industry. Everyone who has had a kid start parsing sensory distinctions you didn't even know were possible. Therefore, saying, "Don't ever buy this again because la la la," and you have no idea what they're talking about. Our palate, our nose is very, very sensitive to all sorts of nuance, and culture and exposure, which is sort of interrelated. So in other words, whatever you had in the first 5 years of life in terms of sensory profiles, that has a massive effect on the rest of your life, unless you make a conscious effort to change it.
Okay.
On what you're going to think is normal in every category you have.
Well,
Right?
and I think there's a lot of interesting info on that, and I want to get to it, but we're going to do it next week because if you enjoyed this podcast, you can definitely follow us on Instagram, Business Talk Sister Gawk. And if you have a question for James, you should definitely check out his book because I read it and it was actually really great. And I learned so much about consumer goods. And we will see you next week.